Welcome to Ballotpedia, your nonpartisan and unbiased source for political news. In this video, we're addressing some frequently asked questions about the presidential transition process and how it works. Let's start with when the new administration takes office and review how long confirmations take. Former President and President-elect Donald Trump will assume office on January 20th, 2025, and the 119th Congress is sworn in on January 3rd, 2025. The Constitution lays the groundwork for presidential appointments. Article 2, Section 2 states that the President, quote, shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States whose appointments are not herein otherwise provided for. This process isn't limited to a handful of positions. In fact, the Center for Presidential Transition reports there are approximately 1,300 political appointee positions that require Senate confirmation. That's a lot of appointments to manage. This process can begin even before a new president takes office. Let's take a look at some recent examples. For President Joe Biden, 4 of his first 15 cabinet nominations had hearings before his inauguration. 6 were confirmed during his first month in office. By comparison, 12 of Trump's nominees had hearings before his inauguration in January of 2017, and 9 were confirmed during his first month in office. What happens to staff not appointed by the incoming president? The leadership of the federal bureaucracy includes more than 7,000 appointees. Of those, about 3,700 are political appointees, and most others are members of the Senior Executive Service, also known as SES or career appointees. Most political appointees step down when their appointing president leaves office. Political appointments generally fall into 4 categories. Presidential appointments with the advice and consent of the Senate. These are top-level cabinet positions and require a Senate confirmation. Presidential appointments not requiring confirmation. These are senior-level positions such as White House aides and advisors. Non-career Senior Executive Service appointment. These officials serve just below the top presidential appointees. Schedule C appointments. These are mainly confidential or policy-determining roles. The Senior Executive Service, or SES, is a subset of the federal civil service that is made up of civilian executives. Simply put, these are non-military professionals who are employed by federal, state, or local government entities. Members of the SES are recruited for their leadership and managerial experience rather than technical expertise. They're hired to serve in senior executive roles below top-level presidential appointees within federal administrative agencies. They're responsible for making important decisions and implementing policy at the agency level. Some examples of senior executive service roles in the government are Chief Financial Officer of a large government department, a director of a major policy office within a department, regional administrator for a federal agency, and Chief Information Officer of a government agency. Career appointees typically remain in their positions across multiple administrations unless they are transferred to other positions. If you like this video, please take a moment to like and share with your network. What is the general process involved with a confirmation? The confirmation process includes several rounds of investigation and review, beginning with the submission of a personal finance report and a background check. The nominee is then evaluated in a committee hearing, which allows for a close examination of the nominee and their views on public policy. Supporters and opponents of the nominee may also testify. Once the nomination is considered by the Senate, unlimited debate is allowed until a majority of the Senate votes to invoke cloture and close debate. Following a vote of cloture, the Senate conducts a simple majority vote on whether to confirm, reject, or take no action on the nomination. If a nomination is left pending at the end of a Congress, it must be sent back to the President, who can then resubmit it to the new Congress. The same procedure applies to any nominee not considered before the Senate enters a recess of more than 30 days, unless there is unanimous consent to bypass the procedure. Are these hearings always televised? There are no requirements for all confirmation hearings to be broadcast. However, many significant hearings are made available to the public through television and live streaming. The level of media coverage usually depends on the importance of the position and the public interest in the nomination. So, who sits in on these confirmation hearings? The key participants in these hearings include committee members, which are senators who are part of the specific committee overseeing the nomination, the nominee for the position under consideration, presenters, which are often senators from the nominee's home state or those with a particular interest in the nomination will introduce the candidate. And in some cases, other individuals may be called as a witness to testify in support or opposition to the nomination. How are people selected for these hearings? Senate confirmation hearing committees are formed through a structured process involving both parties. Party leaders first negotiate committee sizes and ratios. Each party then uses its own method to nominate senators, considering factors like seniority and individual preferences. These nominations are approved by the party conference and then by the full Senate. Does confirmation automatically mean there's going to be a hearing? Once committee hearings are closed, most committees have a set amount of time before a vote is taken on whether the nominee is reported to the Senate favorably, unfavorably, or without recommendation. The nomination will then go to the Senate floor for consideration. Once the Senate considers the nomination, unlimited debate is allowed until a majority of the Senate votes to invoke cloture and close debate. Following a vote of cloture, the Senate conducts a simple majority vote on whether to confirm, reject, or take no action on the nomination. If no action is taken at any stage, the nomination effectively stalls, but does not trigger a new confirmation process. The president would then need to renominate the individual or choose a different nominee to restart the process. Are nominations ever withdrawn? According to the Center for Presidential Transition, most unsuccessful nominees are withdrawn prior to a Senate vote when it becomes apparent there's not enough support for confirmation. Administrations typically anticipate a candidate cannot win the Senate and withdraw the nomination before a failed vote takes place. In fact, only one cabinet nominee has been rejected in a Senate floor vote in the last 60 years. George H.W. Bush's nominee for Secretary of Defense, John Tower, in 1989. Donald Trump announced U.S. Representative Matt Gaetz as his nominee for U.S. Attorney General on November 13, 2024. About a week later, on November 21st, Gaetz withdrew himself from consideration. Gaetz's 8-day nomination tied with George W. Bush's nomination of Bernie Carrick's for the third shortest withdrawn nomination in United States history. Gaetz's withdrawal from consideration as U.S. Attorney General marked the 7th presidential transition in a row where a president had at least one nominee withdrawn or rejected by the U.S. Senate before the end of their second month in office. What withdrawals or rejections have occurred with recent presidents? Joe Biden withdrew one nominee, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Trump during his first term each also had one nomination withdrawn or rejected before the end of their second month in office, while Barack Obama had 3 in this time frame. Of the 7 nominations withdrawn towards the start of a presidential transition since 2001, Gaetz's withdrawal from consideration was the 4th nomination withdrawn before the Senate officially received the nomination. You can learn more about the presidential transition process, the candidates for the new cabinet, and so much more on ballotpedia.org. Thanks for watching.